Avengers Endgame is the longest and most complex entry in the MCU, clocking in as a 3-hour epic crammed with incredible storytelling, character moments, and action set pieces. With most big blockbusters, plenty of stuff winds up on the cutting room floor, and in the case of Avengers Endgame, well, this might not actually be the case. When Collider recently spoke with the movie's directors Joe and Anthony Russo, they asked briefly about how much material was removed from the final movie and how many deleted scenes could surface on the home media release.
It literally hasn't moved maybe more than 2 minutes from its original runtime on the director's cut. We have almost everything in this movie that we shot.
Yeah, exactly.
So are there deleted scenes, or are there...
There's a handful.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of them.
Do you think, though, that there could be 5 or 10 minutes on the Blu-ray, or not even that much?
Probably not 10.
Yeah, 5 is probably a better
right.
estimate, yeah.
Though it seems unlikely we'll ever see any substantial deleted material from Endgame, we can look back at the film's trailers, release concept artwork, merchandising, and industry reports to get a good idea of what scenes or sequences were either shot and cut from the film or were conceptualized and dropped in pre-production. Firstly, let's take a look at the Endgame trailers. As with all great Marvel trailers, those for Endgame were chock full of altered shots, an effort to prevent spoilers and purposely mislead audiences. There's this shot where Hulk was removed from the background, along with this shot where he was likewise removed from the background. There's this one where Thor was removed from the background, this one where Hulk and Thor were removed from the lineup, and this one where Pepper Potts was removed from the foreground. This shot here shows Nebula placed into a completely different location from the spaceship that she's seen on in the actual film. All the appearances of Captain Marvel in the trailers show her in her helmet with Mohawk, despite not wearing the helmet and being featured in a new haircut in the film itself. This shot shows Cap holding an undamaged shield despite it being shattered in the final movie, and likewise this shot removes Thor's hammer Mjolnir, which he is seen holding in the film. The same shot also somewhat obscures Thanos in the background, who is seen more clearly in the final product. One final major alteration shows Cap in a digitally altered suit to conceal the Avengers 1 suit that he's wearing in the actual film. This was obviously done to avoid spoiling the movie's time travel element, though despite this brief shot did make it into a more recent TV spot. This spoilerific shot also marks the Hulk's first appearance in a trailer. Aside from these misdirects, there are a small number of moments from the trailers that didn't appear in the movie at all. Some could be from the small handful of deleted scenes the Russos were referring to, though some could quite possibly have been shot specifically for the trailer to further mislead audiences, much like this classic shot from the Infinity War trailer. In fact, in another interview, the Russos also went on record to say that just as with Infinity War, some footage was shot specifically for Endgame trailers. Firstly, there are a small number of shots which see Nat at the Avengers facility training herself up. I'm guessing it's likely from some training montage set before her and Clint's mission to Vormir. Another shot of Natasha seen in one of the TV spots sees her sitting in lamentation in the pouring rain. I imagine this scene to take place sometime before or after the scene where she asks Rhodey to track down Clint, perhaps before she takes the jet out to Tokyo to confront him. This shot of Thor was one of the money shots of the main trailer, showing him ready to wreak havoc with the Stormbreaker. The only scene that this could have possibly been from is the Thanos confrontation in the garden from early in the movie, given that he appears as Fat Thor in the remainder of the movie, but I can't imagine how it would have even fit in with that sequence. I mentioned in an earlier video that I did that I thought the shot looked ripped direct from this moment in Infinity War, and actually still think now that it's possibly archive footage shot during the shooting of that scene and simply used here as a misdirect. Other than the altered suit, this moment here is also slightly altered in the trailers, seeing Steve and Tony shaking hands and sealing the deal. While the rest of this exchange was seen during the movie, the handshake was not. This exchange between Natasha and Steve, set in the film just after the 5-year time jump, is slightly altered, and Natasha's hair is even shown to be blonde as it is in the earlier portion of the film, and not the red braided look it is seen during this scene in the film. Natasha's changing hair was a point of speculation amongst fans during the marketing campaign for Endgame, and it's quite clear right now that the filmmakers took this to their advantage. There's a couple of shots of Cap in this focus group sequence that didn't make the final cut. While in the film itself Cap is running the meeting, the trailers almost present it as if Cap is one of the troubled people attending the meeting. This sequence of Tony Stark making a final recording for Pepper is also different. Some of the dialogue isn't in the movie at all, while some of it is obviously taken from alternate takes. Also in the movie, Tony has been digitally altered to appear frail and malnourished, while the trailer presents it as it was likely filmed on set. And finally, the trailer version of the Thor Captain Marvel standoff scene offers an alternate edit with a couple of different shots not seen in the movie. From the film,
I like this one.
and from the trailer.
I like this one.
Speaking Captain Marvel, it's also worth noting the absence of the Captain Marvel post-credit scene in Endgame. Just as with some Marvel films past, it was assumed that this sequence was ripped directly from the movie. However, it's not featured at all in any form. This scene is likely set prior to the movie even beginning, considering that Cap still has his beard, and the first time that we see him in Endgame, he's shaving it off. It's possible that after Captain Marvel arrives in this scene, they clue her up on the situation and then send her off to find Tony. But the strangest thing is, none of them know where he is or that he's even still alive. And when she lands for the first time in Endgame with Tony, it's almost like the first time anyone's ever seen her, and then they clue her in on everything all over again. It's all a little bit confusing, and it's almost like this scene isn't exactly canon, but if you defy any logic, it works okay. It's likely that the scene was shot specifically as a post-credit scene, as it ties directly back to that from Infinity War. It could have even been written by a writer who wasn't quite privy to all the Endgame details. Brie Larson actually mentioned in an interview recently that when she shot this scene, she didn't even know she'd be talking to the Avengers on screen, which tells me that this was likely shot during the production of Captain Marvel and not Avengers Endgame. Speaking of Marvel writers, in an interview with Endgame screenwriters Christopher Markus and Stephen McFeely, the duo shed light on a few alternate scenes that appeared in early drafts of the screenplay. There was an alternate version of the Black Widow Hawkeye scene on Vormir, where Hawkeye ends up sacrificing himself instead of Black Widow. However, writers realized that it was more important for Black Widow's character arc that she be the one that sacrifices herself. Originally, instead of traveling back in time to the first Avengers movie, Tony would instead travel to Asgard during Thor: The Dark World to collect the Tesseract and the Ether. In this version, Tony would wear his stealth suit and be invisible to everyone but Heimdall, and the two would engage in battle. It was also initially planned that Thor would share long scenes with Jane. However, it's likely that Natalie Portman didn't want to return to the movie to shoot new scenes, considering the scenes that she is in the movie were taken from archive footage. The sequence on Morag was originally going to be a huge set piece set underwater, but became too big and too complicated. Other time travel trips had initially been planned for the movie as well, including one to the SHIELD headquarters Triskelion, where somebody would collect the Tesseract and then drive to Doctor Strange's house. The writers acknowledged that this concept was a little bit weird, even going as far as saying, "What were we thinking?" The two writers revealed that a longer version of the end battle sequence was written and actually shot, so maybe this is something that we'll see turn up on the Blu-ray. In an original draft, one scene in the end sequence would have originally seen 18 characters in a trench laying out their plans. This scene was scrapped before filming, however, because according to McFeely, it was completely fake, fraudulent, and unnatural. The duo also mentioned that they had originally planned on bringing other characters into the battle, including Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, who would fight in their original Ant-Man and the Wasp outfits. They also noted that the Netflix characters were even considered at one point, but with differing timelines, it all became a little too complex, with the writers noting that it was even becoming too difficult to keep track of who was in the film as it was. With the film's art book not being published until November, there's scarce concept imagery that we can look at to get an idea of conceptualized sequences that didn't make the cut. However, the few pieces of concept art that we have seen from the movie do shed a little light on some. This first piece is a visualization of a battle set to take place during the movie. This is likely a conceptualized piece of the final battle, however there are a few odd things in here. Firstly, there's the inclusion of Black Widow, who by this point in the film had met her ultimate demise, sadly skipping out the most epic action scene in MCU history. Hulk is also a character who skipped out the the final battle sequence that appears in this piece too, and in a noticeably more primitive design rather than the more refined Professor Hulk design featured in the movie. There's also a short-haired, beardless, slimmer Thor, despite him being heavier and hairier in the final movie, and then there's a fairly prominent appearance of Captain Marvel with longer hair, whose appearance in the final battle is only fleeting. There's a couple of possibilities behind this artwork here. It's likely in earlier screenplay drafts, Nat didn't die, both Hulk and Thor were presented in more traditional appearances, and Captain Marvel originally had a more prominent role in the film, with the likelihood that this piece reflects said draft. Also likely the artist who drew this was given simple nondescript instructions to simply draw the Avengers in battle, or it's also possible that this is a completely different battle set earlier in the movie. There were persistent rumors floating around for a while about a potential battle taking place in the quantum realm between the Avengers and Thanos, and it's very possible that this concept piece was inspired by said sequence, which obviously didn't make it past concept stages. It is worth noting, however, that elements from this piece have been used on official merchandising, including posters and on toy packaging templates, so the entire piece could in fact be a purposeful misdirect in an attempt to prevent the leak of spoilers in merchandise. Another artwork, which is likely a later piece of concept art, presents a more recognizable version of the end battle, with rubble of the Avengers facility in the background. What's notable here, however, is once again a more traditional Thor, and fairly prominent appearances of Spider-Man, Scarlet Witch, Black Panther, and Doctor Strange, all of whom also only had intermittent appearances in the sequence. Again, very likely that this is simply a design to see how the battle could play out on screen, but also possible that some of the fallen characters had a larger role to play in earlier drafts. Other than artwork, we can also turn to merchandise for potential unused concepts. It is worth noting that merchandise isn't always a great indicator of such things and can often be purposely misleading as well, but merchandisers are often given early concepts to create products based on, and the occasional collectible may in fact find itself based on a discarded film concept. When it comes to Endgame, a number of Lego sets could possibly give us an idea of concepts that never came to be. This set shows Hulk once again taking place in the final battle, while Captain Marvel assists. They are seen facing off against Thanos, who wields an enormous hammer weapon. We have Captain America driving around in some kind of Avengers cycle, fending off Outriders, and we also have this War Machine Buster armor, which obviously didn't appear in the film, but certainly would have been awesome to see. Sure, most of these are probably simple misdirects or a case of Lego just taking a little bit of creative freedom, but these do show us potential ideas that may have been kicking around at Marvel. Though again, also take into account this Hall of Armor set featuring Outriders attacking Stark's collection of armors, most of which were destroyed in Iron Man 3, so again, take all of this with a grain of salt. As for rumors, one casting rumor that was reported by a number of reliable sources, including The Hollywood Reporter, saw 13 Reasons Why star Katherine Langford set to play a role in the film, one which would be substantial going forward in the MCU, but would likely be smaller in Endgame, given that all her scenes were allegedly shot during reshoots. While many fans waited all film for her to appear, she quite simply didn't. It's possible that Langford was hired and shot some scenes that didn't make the final cut, perhaps as a character that will instead be utilized as a later date, such as Kate Bishop, Hawkeye's comics protege, the character she was heavily rumored to be playing. She could in fact have been hired to play this character in the upcoming Hawkeye Disney Plus series, which is also rumored, so take that with a grain of salt as well. It's also possible that she had perhaps been in the running to play Hawkeye's daughter or even Cassie Lang, and then didn't get the role, and the report was just simply a case of crossed wires, or also quite possibly she wasn't ever associated with the movie at all, and the report was simply unsubstantiated. Whatever the case, we may not know for sure anytime soon, given the way Langford herself responded to reports on a recent Instagram Q&A. And at that, that's about it for now. It'll certainly be interesting when the Endgame art book comes out later in the year, so we can get a better idea of some of the discarded sequences, and better yet, it'll be great to see what kind of deleted stuff winds up on the movie's home media release. And as we close it out, it's over to you guys. What stuff were you disappointed didn't make it into the final film? Fire away in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. If this is your first time viewing one of my videos, you like what you've seen, you'd like to see more like this in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen right now, and also hit that like button down below if you're feeling extra generous. Also, don't forget to check out my many social media accounts, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon.